Hello there and welcome back to a brand new day in the studio. I hope you had a wonderful day yesterday. In today's episode, we're going to continue this painting that we started yesterday. And this was just the underpainting stage, so I'm going to be guiding you along the classical approach. And I'm going to subdivide the steps into a more concise method. So what I want to do is, again, take the classical approach that we've been using several times, like with the Steve painting and with other realistic paintings that we've done in the past. And I really want to break it down into a very simple and concise set of stages that are easy to follow and easy to describe. And I'm going to keep it in 4. So I'm going to use 4 steps. So the underpainting stage today is going to be the local color stage. Next is going to be the perceptual color stage, and then the selective render. So I'm going to be subdividing it into groups of 4, and then each step, so each one of the 4 steps will be further subdivided, and all of the steps will be analyzed in terms of how they apply the fundamentals. And I'm going to try to get this kind of or I will get this kind of organization written down and have a more clear and concise set of stages, because I do ultimately want to create educational material for you to purchase, for you to use, for self-teaching purposes. And I think it's important to be able to, utilize all of these paintings, okay? We've done so many paintings in this daily painting show. After so many paintings, I think I'm finally starting to zero in on one unified technique, kind of like physics looking for that grand unification theory. But in painting, for me to have one unified classical painting technique, and of course it's not going to be something that's like, I'm not the person that invented classical painting. It's been a thing forever, but what I want to do is redefine it in such a way that is clear, concise, with a set of stages that can bring you, the painter or the beginner, whatever stage you may be. I want it to bring the technique to any skill level. So a person that is in any skill level, and that's what I want to do. That is my ambition with these techniques. So on the palette here, we have a very simple arrangement of colors, and today's episode is going to be based on the local color stage. So we're going to be focusing in particular how to mix local colors, and we'll talk about how I define local colors. So right here we have titanium white, flake white, burnt umber, alizarin crimson permanent, cadmium red medium, yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, ivory black, and our painting medium is Neo Megilp. The brands are pretty much all Winsor and Newton, with the exception of this one right here being a Williamsburg brand. But if you want to know exactly what materials I'm using, you can always feel free to scroll down to the description box down below, and I'll have all that information typed up for you. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you the painting. So again, here's the painting that we started yesterday, and like I said, the Neo Megilp I think really helped this dry, so this is now completely dry. So I'm going to keep an image of our model Madeline in the top left corner of your screen so you can refer to it as the painting develops. And the first thing I'm going to do is apply an extra layer of medium over top of the surface. So this is called oiling out, and what it means is that we're going to be adding our medium over top of the dry painting to get the values that we had originally when the painting was wet, and it also just helps to add more oil as the layers develop. Remember, the fat over lean principle to painting is that you want to add more oil, so you want there to be more oil with the increase in the number of layers that you paint. So for instance, that was the first layer, and now we're going to be applying the second layer. So in the second layer, we want to have a little bit more oil than we had in the first layer. So let's get the Neo Megilp. So just a little bit of Neo Megilp, and we're just going to apply an even distribution of the medium over top of the areas that we're going to work on. Nothing fancy here. Alright, so now that we have the medium onto the dry painting, the next thing to do is to, basically I'm going to be blurring my eyes at the model. So if you're nearsighted like me, just bring your glasses down and just observe the flesh tones that are blur. So local color, what local color is basically the average flesh tone in a particular area. So on my face, the average flesh tone around here, what color is that? I want to figure out that color and then create value changes that are within that same color family. Next thing is going to be what areas of the face are going to have different local colors. What would you say? Okay, so it's going to be the sclera. Okay, it's sclera. No surprise there. Sclera is mostly light gray, or you could think of white for the white of the eye, but it's not really white. I think we know that, right? Okay, so the sclera is going to be one color change, so we're going to want to have a color mixed up for that. And the lips, sclera and the lips. Now there are much more color variations, you know, like pinkish tones on our cheeks, maybe some yellowish hues on our foreheads and some greens down here and all of that stuff, but we're going to apply those more advanced color changes in the next stage. That's going to be the perceptual color stage. So let's go ahead and start mixing up some colors. And forgive me for using the palette, the handheld palette instead of the palette that I put next to the painting. I just really like to hold palettes, and especially if I'm going to be using a classical approach, I better look like a classical painter, right? Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is mix up the color value web for the flesh tones. And so our model, her skin complexion is a little bit, I want to say, closer to the pinkish family than, say, the orange family. I would be, my flesh tone in particular would be a little more in the, I think I'd be closer to the orange-ish family. And the way you observe these colors is by blurring your eyes. You know, the average flesh tone on a model can vary. I know this in particular areas. The idea is not to finish the color today, okay? The idea is to lay down the foundation. So basically foundational colors to build on top of. That's the goal. And if this painting is not dry by tomorrow, which I don't think it will be, even though I'm using a little bit or a lot of Neo Megilp, the thing is that the reds take forever to dry, and I'm going to be using quite a lot of the reds. So what you're seeing me add here now, after putting in the burnt umber, basically everything, okay, everything went into this part here. And now as we're starting to move up in the color value web, in the middle tones, I'm going to be adding more of the flake white, and I'm trying to slow down my mixtures just so you can see how I create particular colors, because you won't be seeing too much of the mixtures when I'm actually painting, just because, again, you don't really need to, because the stage here, the emphasis in this stage is not trying to get so many different color variations. That's going to be next time. The important thing here is to understand this simple flesh tone mixture and how to create value changes that are within this color family. So for instance, this right here might be getting too warm, so I'll come back and revisit that later. But now the titanium white lives basically in the lighter colors. So I think, it's my guess that this is a little bit too red. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the cadmium red just to ensure that pinkish color that I was talking about. And that's going to be about it for the lightest light. So we're going to make another little journey down here, neutralizing the colors even more with the sap green and the alizarin crimson. And I chose to shrink down my color palette. I remember I had I think like, I don't know, 16 something colors on my palette before. Just for the sake of the classical approach, I chose to shrink the number of colors just so it's a little easier to follow along with the flesh tone mixtures. So a little more ultramarine blue here, just to calm down the heat of this color, and I think that's about good for the color value web. So that's how you're going to get the entire array of flesh tones. But now the question is, how do you mix up the sclera? So the sclera, very simply, is going to be black and white. Remember, the sclera is the white of the eye. Black and white. So this is going to be sclera dark and some flesh tone, but the trick is there's already flesh tone here. I don't know if you can see it too well there. Let's see. So again, there's already some flesh tone in the brush here. And this is pretty much the same color as the palette. So now I'm going to mix up Scleral Light. So I'm going to have Scleral Dark, Scleral Light, and these are the local colors, okay? Local color for basic flesh tone, local color for sclera. I think sclera is going to need a lighter one. This is basically a grayscale with a little bit of flesh tone, and that's all. Let's even take more of the flesh tone, why not? Okay, so now that we have that, using the color that's already on the brush, let's go ahead and just rapidly mix up a color value web for the lips. So the lips are very pink, but they're not like a bright pink, and they're much warmer than the flesh tones on the on the face. So we're going to start off with the darkest darks being the alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, using what's already on the brush to neutralize these colors. I definitely don't want anything oversaturated. And then the cadmium red is going to live in the middle. So the middle is going to be like cadmium red, yellow ochre, more cadmium red, and now just a tiny bit of the titanium white. And let's just throw in some flake white in the middle. Alright, and there you have it. That's going to be the color value web for the flesh tones, the sclera, and then the lips. So now this is going to be our designated recharging brush, and we're going to want to clean off this brush just because we have so much of the red on it. And to clean the brush, we're just going to use our odorless mineral spirits, but that is a little bit of a lie. This is Citrus Essence Brush Cleaner. I almost forgot that I was using this. So Citrus Essence Brush Cleaner. And I'm just using it because I had it. I purchased it a long time ago just because it's kind of like what it says. Natural, sorry, the glare. Natural solvent for oil painting. Yeah, you can read that there. But, I still need to buy more odorless mineral spirits, and this is just something I had lying around. There, the glare is gone. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be using to clean off the brushes. Someone in the comments did say that, there's some questions about using this over any other kind of brush cleaner, and I'm not going to get into that, so I'm just using this for now in place of odorless mineral spirits, but later on I will buy some more odorless mineral spirits when I get the chance. So we're going to put the recharging brush on the side here, and we're going to get just 3 brushes for now. So I'm going to have a light brush, middle tone brush, and a dark brush. And with these 3 brushes, I'm going to be working in specific areas of the face. In particular, I'm going to be looking at the large planes to start off with. Like I said, I'm going to be breaking this down into a more concise set of stages. So I'm going to be using my large planar divisions first, and I'm going to work my way into smaller planar divisions. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the forms, basically, trying to think about it more conceptually now. I'm thinking about it more in 3 dimensions with this pass. So now I'm just going to get the, let's start off with the middle tone brush. So I'm going to get the middle tone brush, and I'm going to just get something in here. So the middle tones are going to live somewhere around here, the light brush over here, and then the dark brush over here. So I don't know, let's just start off with this. I can already tell it might be a little bit too orangey. I may want to raise a little bit more of the pink, so I'm just going to go ahead and tweak that color with the alizarin crimson, the titanium white into here. It's fairly light, but this is still going to be my halftone. And while I have it, might as well just get the light brush. A little bit of the yellow ochre, though not that much. Let's just mix this up. No extra medium, so just what's on the brush here. Alright, so now we're basically just going to be looking at these large planes. Now see how much lighter we can go? So that's going to be our light brush. So even though I have three values, okay, three brushes, I can still have some more subdivisions of value on the brushes. So see how I was saying, trying to keep, this is a light flesh tone, a darker flesh tone, and now I'm going to switch to the middle tone brush. I am going to add, I don't know if you can see it there, I am going to add a little bit more of a kind of cooler color. Hopefully you can see the mixtures here. So a little bit more of a cooler color for the midtones. There we go. So again, this is for the larger plane divisions. And it's going to be really, really straightforward for the forehead. So that's why I'm kind of starting off with the forehead. And it's going to get darker over here. Now, the boundary of the form is going to be a kind of important thing to take note. So notice how there's going to be a little swoop over here. So this plane right here is going to get darker, just because the plane is turning away from the light much more. And there's a specific value for each plane. So remember, a plane is a three-dimensional concept of a flat sheet in three-dimensional space. And the more you can conceptualize individual areas, such as this one versus this one versus this one. So I'm saying that this plane is facing the light more than this one, and this one is facing the light more than this one. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of in-between stuff going on here. So for instance, I'm going to let the value drop a little bit towards here. And it might be a little too pink for comfort, but that's okay. The important thing here is to start to add basic color, and then once this dries, we'll be able to come back in with much more refined color. But that we can have a very organized approach to this is the most important thing. And I do want to write a formal, like a book or something about this, continuing to make it as clear as possible. I have had many questions on whether I have any books out, so not yet, hopefully soon. So right here is going to be another plane change, and I'm going to need to use the halftone brush. So it's pretty much the value that we have already established with the underpainting, but a little bit lighter. So the idea is, once we start to add, like you're seeing here, the color, so adding the color is going to give us another, basically like another perspective or another fresh look at the shapes. And now this is one approach. So this is the classical approach, correct? But I also want to have, a formal set of stages for alla prima as well. So definitely be on the lookout for that. So I did make the nose a little bit pinker, I will admit to that. And what I did was I took from, hopefully you can see, I took a little bit from here and then put it into here, and that's all I did. Now I'm going to need to switch to the halftone brush again. So the idea with the underpainting, remember, was to, so what we did yesterday was establish the composition, that is the placement of the head. And then we started to block in where the features are going to fit and all of that. I should have had a different brush for the sclera, but I think the sclera is fine with the underpainting color. I will go back into that later. And the thing with the layering, you don't have to worry about going too light. So knowing that you're going to put in another layer, so I'm not afraid of making that layer, that spot, too light, because you know, it's easier to darken a color than it is to lighten it, I find, when you're layering with oil paint. So I'm going to push a little more light on the upper eyelid. And I'm going to, hopefully you can see this, I'm taking a risk with my camera here, because I can't really see what you're seeing, but a little bit of the pink. I'm going to make this a little darker, but a little warmer. And I'm going to keep the color variations, whoops, at a minimal. So when that happens, all you need is a clean brush. And you can easily just subtract. That's the beauty of layering. Now the next thing I'm going to want to do is add more light over here. And if there are any drawing mistakes, which I'm sure there are, even though I can't see them right now, when the time comes to make the changes, the idea is to rely on the, you know, this larger structure that we have, the mask of the face, basically. Any of the features, like I think this eye might have to either move up a little bit or shrink or whatever. We'll be able to do that later on, possibly even today. But right now, what I'm trying to do is establish these major planes. So this plane change right here, this is for the top plane of the cheekbone. And especially when you're working from a photo reference, you want to be very cautious with the values, because the photo references tend to compress the values, which is a good thing, but they tend to lose a lot of information, in particular around here and here. Putting in a plane change here. Now, I perceive that this plane here is lighter, so we're going to go up in value. So there. Yep, so right here it's going to get lighter. I'm going to switch to the halftone brush. It's definitely going to be a halftone over here. And when we move on to the lips, you'll see a neat little trick on how to get the lips, the color for the lips very quickly in the local color stage. And all of this is relying pretty heavily on the block-in, the initial drawing that we did with paint. So if anything major needs to change, it's not that, you know, not that big of a deal, because we're working with these larger planes. So if anything like tiny, like the eye or something needs to be adjusted, then we can do it, because we will still have this larger structure. All right, so for the mouth, hopefully you can see this on your screen. Taking a big risk here with my camera, or with my camera angles. I know I should have had the palette on the side there, but I really like holding the palette, okay? I get a little bit of the pink. Let's see if I can get you a close-up image. Alright, so the camera is now much closer, but it's at a more severe angle. So what I did was I added the paint, and now with a dry brush, I'm just going to disperse it using the layer underneath. See how I can automatically get some of the value changes very, very quickly. That's a little trick. While we still have this brush, let's go ahead and add the highlight for the lower lip. And we're using the value scale that we mixed up on the palette, taking directly from that. So the first thing I did was I kind of scumbled a little bit of the flesh tone onto the lip, and then with the dry brush, which is now not a dry brush, I kind of just pushed it into, I kind of rubbed it into the painting. And now we're just using that layer to help create these little soft transitions. So I think that there's another little plane down here that I can describe with much more clarity now. And that's simple. We can put in the first, or we can put in the local color path for the mouth. Let's push this dark a little bit. The emphasis here is definitely on the value, okay? Once this dries, we'll be able to push the color. And with the halftone brush, this plane is going to definitely need a little bit more, a darker tone. So right around here, so like I said, this is a large plane. These are the large plane divisions. So this is a large plane. We're subdividing it 1, 2. And then we'll have an even lighter one over there. Just using the middle tone brush. I'm going to switch to the light brush. It's because there's a lighter plane up there. Now we want to make these value transitions a little more subtle. So we're pushing them even closer to one another. Remember, subtlety just means how close can you get the values to one another without losing their differentiation from one another. And all of these values that I'm applying them based on a kind of three-dimensional understanding of the planes, and I want to write up some more formal stuff about the planar analysis, for lack of better words. But you're seeing it here. I mean, this is plane change because that's turning very subtle. And when I say that the emphasis is on the value and on the values, it's because I'm not that worried about trying to get the right color just yet. What I'm focused on is having another layer of oil paint on here that has the local color. So remember, local color, like I said before, it's just the average color. That right there is a little too dead. So I'm going to add a little bit more warmth to it. So areas like the cheekbone, in particular, you want to not make it too cold. So even though I did say that we're going to focus on the value, with the cheekbones in particular, you want to err on a little bit of the warmer, pinker side. Obviously not as exaggerated as I'm making here. What I'm doing is I'm just pushing the color a little bit more pink, and I'm dispersing it using the underpainting. So I'll show you here, right? So I'm using the underpainting to help bring down the saturation of that color that I just put in. And like I was talking about yesterday, there's always an awkward stage in portrait painting whenever you add in new information. So that's just something to be aware of. And with the halftone brush, I'm going to be making this a little bit lighter So we're also further refining the forms that we mapped out. So tell you what, now I think it's a good time to start to get into the smaller plane divisions. Now, you don't necessarily have to do this in this stage. So, you know, when I formally write out the technique, so the technique that we're using here, I do want to formally write it out. And in the future, I'm going to sell, you know, self-training information based on this technique that I'm going to be showing you. So the idea is going to be to own the technique, okay? Be your very best with technique, because technique, you know, like being able to make something look clean and clear, crisp and clear, is how we communicate visually without the need of having to push a style or something onto it. Style is something that you already have within you. Style is like a signature, and everyone has their own signature. And I don't mean signature like I don't mean literally signing something. I mean everyone has their own particular personality, and it will always show through in your work. The stronger you get with your technique, the more clear your signature will become. We all have that signature within us. So in terms of the smaller plane divisions, so I'm going to be grouping these planes now. So one here, 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 here. Though I'm not really that worried about the shadow. I want to keep the shadow tone very simple. So I'm not really going to mess with it too much, for lack of better words. So there you can see it, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's how we subdivide the planes. And even here, a little half tone here. So there's going to be a smaller plane division too. You know, and now that we're putting in these planes, I can see that I can push a little more volume into this by sinking in that value. And while we're at it, I'm going to get a different brush. I'm going to put a little bit of Scleral Light. Remember the color that we mixed up before? We're going to put in that color. So that is Scleral Light. It looks extremely bright, but it's not the lightest light. And I'll prove it to you. So I'm going to use a little bit of titanium white into Scleral Light. See, we still had much more. So it's important to know your value range, especially when you start to close up the forms, which is another term that I'm going to put into the, you know, the formal writing that I'm going to have for this technique. So now I'm going to get a little bit of Sclera Dark. It's just a little shadow here, tiny, tiny. And see how quickly we're able to, you know, bring more depth into this painting. And notice I'm very relaxed. This is a very relaxing way to approach it. I tend to consider, I think of Alla Prima as the Fast and Furious way of creating a painting. Nothing wrong with that. I like Fast and Furious. It's just important to know the differences. So now with another small brush, I'm going to get some of the darker color that we mixed up in the flesh tones. We're going to put in this right here. This is for the accent of the tear duct. It's pretty much just ivory black, alizarin crimson, burnt umber. Something feels a little off with this eye. It might be too wide. And if it feels too wide, I'm going to use a little tool to check it first. Now let's remember that the model is in a 3/4 position. So that means that we're going to be seeing a little bit more of this side than this side. So it's natural that this eye would be a little bit wider. Plus, we're losing a little, we don't see the tear duct at all here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my little caliper here. Haven't used these in a long time. So this is basically as much as we're seeing with the eye on the left. And minus the tear duct, I'm going to go over here. See that? See how much wider this is? So that means maybe by this much I need to push that over. So I'm going to let these be pretty much the same size. Maybe this eye will be a little bit, I don't know, a little bit wider. But not by much. It doesn't really need to be that much wider. So when we make a change, maybe this is something I should put into my my writings as well on how to make corrections. So if I want to move this over here, I'm going to use line first. So right down there. So that's the change I want to make. So using line first, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in Sclera Dark. So push that shape over, no harm there. And then we're going to get the middle tone brush. Middle tone brush. We're going to push this inwards to make that change. Very simply there. Now this shape is a little bit off, but it doesn't matter to me right now. What matters is that change. Let's double check now. They should be pretty similar there, but only a little bit wider there. So that's more important to me, you know, getting those larger relations than, you know, like how perfectly rendered is that eye or whatever. Like we can render it perfectly later on. When we close up the forms. Though I don't think I'm going to close up the forms too much with this one or with this layer. And for me, I define closing up form as applying the entire value range across the entire surface that you're painting. The entire surface, and by surface I mean the entire structure, okay? So this right here, for instance, the entire, for the upper eyelid, I would be utilizing the entire value scale. So the darkest dark would be there, and then all of the little values would fit in between there. And that's how I would close up the form. So I'm using the eyelashes actually to push this up. All the dark value for the eyelashes. And remember, when in doubt, blur it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this edge much softer, though I have the proportion that I want. And with the same brush and the darker flesh tone, we're going to put in this value. And now I'm just going to get a clean brush and just kind of push the paint over here and create a softer edge. And that being said, I think that I'm going to let that be it for today's episode. Remember, today's episode was about the local color stage. And so we did that. We looked at the larger planes, and the local color stage was basically about looking at those basic flesh tones, you know, the basic flesh tones for the face, the skin tones, the sclera, and the lips. Now, the next stage is going to be the perceptual color. not necessarily, so I may have missed some things like the iris. That's like another local color change. I just completely forgot. It slipped my mind, but I think that I'm going to let the iris be in the underpainting stage. So the next stage is going to be about looking at more specific color changes. So we're going to relate the shadow, suppose like the shadow underneath the mandible, the shadow on the nose, and we're going to relate certain areas of color to one another, and then we're going to start to close up some of the forms. And then after that, it's going to be the selective render. That being said, in a world that can be so negative, be the spark that ignites positivity among all of us. I really hope that today's episode helps you out. I really do wish you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll be back again with our next episode tomorrow.